Bonjour and welcome to the Big D Podcast. I am your host, contributor at fansided.com, Chris Halicke. And if you couldn't guess by the way I greeted you today, we're going to be talking about something foreign. That's right, we are going to be talking about the Women's World Cup, which is in France here in 2019. And our women's team is going to be there, and they are favorites. So this is something very exciting, something that we didn't get to experience last year when the men played theirs, and we'll get into some of that. This is exciting, man. Soccer doesn't get a lot of love, and we're going to get deeper into that in this episode. We're not going to do that much of an actual preview of the Women's World Cup. You can get that anywhere. You can go to Fox Sports. You can go anywhere to get a preview, but we're going to talk a little bit about it, but we're going to dive deeper into maybe why so many people just don't care, or they care right now because they're kind of World Cup fans, but we'll get into some of that. But I want to start off again by saying that we will be talking about a lot of soccer. Will be a soccer dedicated episode of the Big D Podcast. I mentioned in the debut episode was it Monday night that first one went up? Either way, doesn't matter when. The first episode went up. I mentioned that we will talk about the four major teams here in Dallas, but we will talk about some other things. And I mentioned us talking about the Women's World Cup, and it started. This podcast is being recorded on June 7th. It is 10:49 p.m. as I speak. I don't know when this is going to be uploaded. I might wait a couple days. I don't know. I could upload it tonight. I don't know. We'll see how tired I am after I'm done recording this. The U.S. women's team doesn't play their first game until Tuesday, I believe it is. They take on Thailand. Yeah, it's Tuesday at 2 p.m. here locally in Dallas if you're on the East Coast, 3 p.m. And if you're on the West Coast, that would be noon for you. They take on Thailand, so they don't play for a few days. Again, this is being recorded on a Friday night, so it's gonna be a lot of fun getting into this and talking about it. The host country France walloped South Korea today. It was the only game that went on today. They beat them 4-0. Not a big surprise there. They're the host country. They wanted to start off with a bang, and they sure did it. And they are considered to be one of the favorites as well, along with the United States and Germany. And Australia is looked at one as well with a lot of potential. There's a few teams to really watch out for in this World Cup. But I want to start off with this. I want to start off by giving a lot of props to our women's soccer team. They should be getting a lot of recognition right now. And there's a reason why we should be getting into this World Cup and really supporting them. They're the defending they won in 2015, so they're the defending champions. They are 3-time champions, which is, the men's team has never won. They've come close a couple times, but they've never won. Even for the men, getting to the knockout stage is considered an accomplishment. Even last year, qualifying would have been an accomplishment. Even then, that still wouldn't have done it, and they didn't even qualify. So that just shows you how much further our women are above our men. Now, this isn't a pissing contest. We can talk about the differences of who can stand up and who can't whenever we're talking about pissing contests. It's the same thing when it comes to women and men, and we should just be supporting them all together. But I'd want to give mad props to our women's team because they are that good. Men get the glamour, the highlights. They get all the publicity, and just think about like the WNBA. The WNBA gets jokes cracked on it all the time. Why? Because, what's the reason? I don't want to blame anybody of anything, but there's a reason why, people like Dwight Schrute on The Office can be playfully misogynistic, and we think it's funny. You know, I'm not trying to make this a feminist issue, but at the same time, it's like, come on, let's give our women some credit. They are really, really good. Our women's soccer team and our women's hockey team are both way better. I want to be fair to our men's hockey team. Our men's hockey team is pretty good, but our women are better. Our women, both our women's soccer team and our women's hockey team. The women won the World Cup in 2015, and the women won the Olympic gold in hockey in the last Winter Olympics. So our women are accomplishing not just really good things, but championship things. I mean, and we desperately, want our teams to succeed. We want our men to succeed. Remember the craze that happened around the Men's World Cup in 2014? I mean, the fact that the men got out of that group of death that they were in 2014 and made it into the knockout stage, that was considered a huge accomplishment, especially for not having Josie Altidore for it was at least a few games. He got hurt in the first game, and I think he came back in that game against Belgium. It's escaping my memory right now. But that game against Belgium that they lost in the knockout stage, where Tim Howard saved, a gazillion shots and became an internet sensation because of how great he was in a losing effort. We want our teams to succeed. We want our soccer teams to succeed, and we should. And this kind of leads me into my next topic is, why do we only get the soccer craze around the World Cup times? Last year, the craze wasn't even here because the men didn't even qualify. And there was a huge outrage when they didn't qualify. And, I mean, for good reason. There is never an excuse for the men to never qualify. Never an excuse. We are in the weakest group in the world in terms of the top teams out of that group that can qualify just to make it into the World Cup. The only team that should possibly finish ahead of us in the stages, whether that be the men or the women, would be Mexico. And with the women, our U.S. team is always going to be first, almost always, unless there's a serious regression and the Mexican team gets way better. Or when it comes to the men, like I said, the Mexican team should be the only team that ever finishes ahead of them. I mean, Chile should not be finishing ahead. Trinidad and Tobago should not be a threat. It's embarrassing for the men. So I want to give mad props to our women's team for being so good and for being favorites going into this, and which is why, I mean, if anything, Americans we want our teams to win. We are so centered on sports. We want our teams to win. The women have a great opportunity to win yet another World Cup and be the first repeat champion in the Women's World Cup history. No women's team has ever repeated as champion. That'll be something really good. But this does lead me into, like I said before, this leads me into my next topic, and that is, why is it around the World Cup is the only time that we really ever get into soccer? Is it just because it can't compete with sports like football and basketball and baseball? Or, why can't it compete? You go outside the United States and soccer is everywhere. You go to Europe, oh my gosh, it's everywhere. Everywhere. It's like the NFL, only bigger. I mean, it's crazy. And, here, there's just not a big emphasis on it. And there's a lot of talk about why soccer isn't so popular in the United States. And I truly believe, and I know this has been used as a scapegoat for a lot of people in this argument, but I do fully believe in that the pay-to-play model that is going on in the United States is a big issue. It's a huge issue. And I'm not saying it's the only reason why soccer isn't as popular in the United States, but it definitely plays a really, really big factor. I mean, I just think about myself. My son is 3. He'll be 4 in a year, for you math majors out there. And so he can start playing soccer next year. And I'm super stoked about it. And let's say he gets in, a year or 2 and he's way better than everybody else. And the wheels start turning in my head like he may have a future. And I think about it and I'm like, well, I don't want to let him continue to play on the, community teams, here. I mean, the town that I live in has a really, really nice community. We have a soccer complex 2 minutes from the house. There's, I don't know how many fields at that complex. There's probably at least 8 to 12 fields. And that's that's nothing compared to, you go up to it. If you ever go to an FC Dallas game, the soccer complex up there, it's like as far as the eye can see of soccer fields. But if my son's way better than everybody else that he's playing with or playing against, I'm going to start thinking, well, maybe I need to get him into some travel teams. That's going to be a lot of time and a lot of effort. But if he has a real future in soccer, then I want to encourage that. And as long as he wants to continue to do it as well, then I want to encourage that as his father. Because if you can be a professional athlete and take care of mom and dad, then by all means do it. But no, in all seriousness, once you start looking into the cost of travel teams, it's ridiculous. Now, granted, you're putting a lot of effort into it. You're putting a lot of hours into it. It takes a lot of training. I get it. I understand it. Things don't come free. Coaching, it doesn't come free. Training doesn't come free. Field rentals doesn't come, they don't come free. Things cost money. Time and money. Probably the two entities in the universe that are the most demanded are time and money, especially in Western culture. And, here we are in the United States, while, making everybody pay thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for their kids to play soccer when kids in Europe are getting an opportunity to play for free. Probably all they have to pay for is their soccer should be the cheapest or the second cheapest sport in the United States to play. You think about the equipment you have to buy. In basketball, all you need are shoes. Anything else is, it's preference. You want to wear a shooter sleeve? Wear a shooter sleeve. Go buy it yourself. But the only thing you absolutely need in basketball are shoes. And ask Zion Williamson, get some good shoes. Football, you got to pay for pads. Hockey, you got to pay for pads. Baseball, you got to pay for a bat. You got to pay for gloves, batting gloves, cleats, there are other equipment in baseball. Soccer, cleats, shin guards. Done. It's over. I mean, seriously, it should be the cheapest or the second cheapest sport, and it's the most expensive. By far. Maybe hockey competes with it. And hockey, it ranges in different areas of the country. It's probably a lot harder here in Dallas to play some significant hockey than in, let's say, Boston or Chicago or Minnesota or Pittsburgh or anywhere else that hockey is really, really popular. Soccer should be one of the easiest things and most accessible things to play, and it's yet the hardest thing to do unless your kids are just playing for fun and community. Because let's just be honest. The majority of kids, probably 98% of kids that are playing in these community leagues like the under 6, under 8, under 9, under 10 leagues that aren't travel teams have no professional future in soccer. The kids that are playing on travel, I mean, think about it. Even the amount of kids that are on travel teams, how many of those kids have a future in professional soccer? But how many Tim Howards? How many Christian Pulisics? How many Clint Dempseys are we missing out on because their families can't afford to play it? Going back to what I was saying before, if my son gets a lot better and I want to possibly put him on a travel team, I can tell you right now, my wife and I are pretty comfortable right now with our finances. That's something I don't want to pay. I almost hope that my son isn't that great at soccer and hope that he's a lot better at a cheaper sport. I hope he gets really tall and can play in the NBA. All I have to do is buy him shoes and he can play basketball, and maybe he can be the next Dirk Nowitzki. But it's way too expensive. And like I said, I'm comfortable. There are a lot of families that are way worse off than I am right now, that their kids might want to play soccer and they can't. It's just something that needs to be fixed in the United States. Now, obviously, people that just say, oh, well, you shouldn't have the pay-to-play model. Well, the money's got to come from somewhere, so who's it going to come from? Well, one of the first things that can happen is that the MLS teams can fund it. They have enough money. These teams have way too much money. You can talk about how much athletes get paid. You can talk about how much money teams make. If you want to invest in your communities and see the kind of talent that you could possibly have, MLS should fund it. The teams should fund it, because almost no teams fund it right now. They're getting players essentially for free. And it's bullcrap. It's a toxic model for developing talent and finding talent. More importantly, finding talent. You can develop talent. You get talent on those travel teams, they can grow. They can get better. But I mean, you think about any other sport, football. It's easy. It's not. I'm not saying it's easy to make it into the NFL. If anybody could make it into the NFL, I mean, anybody would. I'm just saying, especially here in Texas, every high school, their main focus is football. Maybe, some of the really country ones, they'll focus on like fishing, something, outlandish. Like, I think like I've heard of high schools having fishing teams. That's just completely like, really? Like, I've heard of some crazy stuff before, but you're going to have a fishing team and not have a soccer team? Football's easy to find, really good ways. I mean, you go to your public high school. Public high schools all over the country, especially in a state like Texas, they focus a lot on football and put a lot of money and time and resources into developing their players and possibly moving them on to college. College football, huge. It's the easiest pathway to get to the professional leagues. That or baseball. Baseball is probably the easiest. And then I'd say probably the NFL. Maybe basketball. I don't know. It's hard. I'd say baseball is probably the easiest. NFL is pretty difficult. But the NBA, I mean, there's only 2 rounds in the NBA draft. So I'd probably put football above basketball in terms of ease of getting into. Plus, the NFL teams are much larger. There's 53 men on each NFL team. I mean, I'm no math major. I can get out my calculator here. 53 times 32. Somebody do math for me. That's a minimum of 1,696 players in the NFL. That's way more than's in the NBA. That's probably way more that's in the NBA and the developmental league combined. But soccer it's way too, it's not a good model. It's not a good model for finding players and more and developing them. It's sad, and it's probably one of the reasons why it's not as popular. If their kids, they grow up, aren't watching it. Some of their friends play it. And let's say they get pretty good at it, and then parents start researching, and they find out, if you really want to have a future, you've got to pay for these teams, and man, they are not cheap. And that turns parents off. Well, why don't you play something easier like football or basketball or baseball? It's a lot cheaper to play those sports. Well, Why do you think America develops a way more on football and baseball and basketball? It's because there's a bigger emphasis on developing kids. And all three of those sports don't have a pay-to-play model. Soccer has one, and anybody who can't afford those prices or don't want to pay those prices, those kids are automatically not going to be playing. Automatically. Without even having a chance. In Europe, there's a lot of those kids that don't get to play either, but they at least get an opportunity to try. A lot of these kids don't even get an opportunity to try. It's because they can't afford to do it. It's not right. It's not that, like I said, it's not the biggest factor. There are other things. There's not a lot of marketing for it. I mean, there's a reason why when the LA Chargers, when the Chargers moved from San Diego to LA and they don't have a football stadium to play in yet. And since they were the second team, the Rams moved to LA and then the Chargers were the second team to move back to LA. The Rams, claimed the College Stadium there, where the Rose Bowl is. They claimed that stadium, so the Chargers can't play there as well. So they're playing at a soccer stadium. And there's a reason why we make fun of it. It's because it's a soccer stadium. I don't know the capacity, but I don't think it exceeds 20,000 people. Well, football stadiums nowadays hold at least 60,000, if not more. I mean, Cowboy Stadium, good Lord, how many people were at the very first game at Cowboy Stadium? It was definitely over 100,000 people. Football stadiums hold way more here in America. And then you go to Europe, soccer stadiums there are like football stadiums here. Bigger emphasis on it. Now, I'm not saying that we should be putting the same kind of emphasis that, European countries put on soccer, but there might be a lot more people interested if their kids could play it and their parents could afford for them to play it. I don't think it's the be-all, end-all in terms of fixing the problem, but I think it would be a great start if we got rid of the pay-to-play model. I want to shift to this. The Women's World Cup, like I said, started, here on Friday, and the women get into it on the U.S. women's team gets into it on Tuesday. They are in a pretty easy group. They start off by playing Thailand, and I'm pulling up their schedule right now. They start off with Thailand, and they play Sweden third. I'm trying to think of who they play in between. Who's the other team in their group? They are in Group F, and Chile is the other team in their group. The women, so they play Thailand Tuesday, then they play Chile, I don't know what day, and then they play Sweden. The women should have already qualified for, so in case for anybody who doesn't know how it works, there are 6 groups of 4, so if, math majors out there, that's 24 teams. The top 2 teams from each group, along with the top 4 third-place teams from the groups, all make it to what's called the round of 16, which is the first round of the knockout stage, and then it just becomes a basic, one-game playoff tournament after that. And the United States should have already qualified for the knockout stage after the first 2 games. They should handle Thailand and Chile pretty handedly. And the way the standings work, it's point based, like in hockey. If you're a hockey fan, wins earn you 3 points, draws earn you 1 point, losses obviously are 0 points. So the U.S. should have 6 points after the first 2 games. Depending on what they do with Sweden, Sweden actually eliminated the women in the 2016 Olympics. So the Swedish team is not to be taken lightly. And they will try to upset the U.S. in that game. The top 2 teams out of that group should be the U.S. and Sweden. The really good chance, it's potential, not guaranteed, but it's potential that if the women's U.S. team makes it out and they're the first place team in their group, that in the round of 16 they could play host country France, and that is a potentially anticipated matchup if that does end up happening. And the reason why that's so looked at is because this is one of the first times in a long time that the women could be eliminated in the first game of the knockout stage. France has all of the capabilities in the world of being the best team in women's soccer. They could easily win, I won't say easily, but they could very feasibly win this World Cup. But they've been tagged as being choke artists, and playing in your host country could have one of two effects. Either it motivates you and really lights a fire under you and you play a lot better, or you buckle under the pressure and you lose. They showed in their very first game, they played South Korea and they won 4-0. So they've already got 3 points. One more win in their group almost guarantees them a spot in the knockout stage, and it would not be surprising if they did it. France is a very, very good team, and somebody that the U.S. should be very cognizant of whenever they get past the group stage. But more than anything, and here, wrapping it up, I want to really encourage you to tune in. Like I said, the first game is Tuesday afternoon at 2 p.m. here Central Time. Tune into it. These ladies are fantastic at their craft. They are really, really good. It's going to be a little bit different. Hope Solo's not in net for the U.S., and she is potentially one of the best U.S. soccer players, men or women, to play ever. Hope Solo's not going to be there, but there's still going to be plenty of people to know. Tobin Heath, Alex Morgan, Carly Lloyd. There's going to be plenty of names to know. This team is very capable. There's a reason why they are one of the favorites to win. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let's get behind this team the way that we get behind our men's team, because both teams are more than deserving of our support. It's gonna be a lot of fun. The World Cup's gonna be a lot of fun. I'm gonna have a lot of fun tuning in and watching and cheering on our ladies. I was so proud of them in 2015. It was awesome to get to see one of our teams win something in soccer. Now I know that our women have always been really good and always been really competitive, but it's really it's refreshing, especially after the disappointment that the 2018 World Cup was for Americans, not having our men's team there. It's just it's refreshing. For this week's walk-off, I'm going to continue on my little rant about the issues with soccer in America. So here goes. Here is my walk-off. The MLS is not that great of a league. It's just not. There's a reason why the best American players, and I'm specifically talking about men here, don't play in the MLS. And when they do, they're either at the very, very beginning of their career or on the back nine of their career. Tim Howard started off by being a backup. I remember him being Tony Meola's backup in the 90s and early 2000s. And then he went to Everton and was Everton's goalie. I don't know if that was an exact transition, but Tim Howard, the majority of his professional career was playing for Everton in the European Premier League. And when he's getting near the end of his career, he came back over and played in Colorado for a season or two, and then he was done. He's retired now. And Tim Howard is, without a shadow of a doubt, the best goalkeeper especially men's goalkeeper that has ever played in U.S. history. And the U.S. has always been pretty good about developing goalkeepers. There's always been some really good goalkeepers for the U.S. And Tim Howard is, I mean, not even close, head and shoulder way above anybody else in terms of goalkeeping. Christian Pulisic. He's played for Borussia Dortmund in the Bundesliga, and now he got transferred to Chelsea. He set the record for an American being transferred. You know, the price tag, I think it was $73 million is what was paid. I don't remember what it was in euros. I don't know the conversion. But it was essentially $73 million that Chelsea bought him from Borussia Dortmund. And he's still very, very young. He's already a really good player, and he could continue to get even better. I'm not saying he's ever going to become a Messi or a Ronaldo, but he could have the potential of being a really, really, really good superstar soccer player. And why do you think he's not playing in the MLS? It's because the MLS is not a Premier League. It's Timothy Way not playing in the MLS. Kellen Acosta not playing in the MLS. He used to play in the MLS, not playing there anymore. He's over in Europe now. The best players in the world play in Europe, whether that be in the English Premier League, whether that be in the Bundesliga, whether that be in League One, wherever it is. They're all in Europe. They're not in the MLS. And going back to what I said before, maybe the pay-to-play method helps a little bit more, and the focus on developing youth talent here becomes more centralized by the MLS teams, and they want to invest more in their, homegrown talent. Or we just continue to let our American players go over to Europe and get better there. I mean, because for me, I don't have like a dedicated fan. I'm not like a dedicated fan of like any team. Like, I like FC Dallas. I like watching FC Dallas play, and I root for them when I'm watching them. I am going to be supporting Chelsea because Christian Pulisic is now playing there, and that is the main reason why I'm doing that. It's not because I'm trying to hop on any kind of a bandwagon for the EPL or anything like that. I like watching Christian Pulisic play, and he's going to be playing for Chelsea. I watched him whenever he was playing for Borussia Dortmund, and now he's going to be playing for Chelsea. So now I'm going to be watching Chelsea a lot more often. I'm a fan of the men's and women's national teams. Those are my favorite teams to watch. And so that includes the players that play for them. And all of the either established really good players. I mean, Clint Dempsey's like one of the rare exceptions that has spent the majority of his career, or not all of his career, in the MLS. And Clint Dempsey's been a really good player. He's been a really good player, but is he, top 3 U.S. players of all time? You can make an argument for it, but it's not like, set in stone. Clint Dempsey's been a really good player. But and he's one of the rare exceptions. And the thing is that could he have been even better if he did go over to Europe and play? This is something that is a big misconception. And see, the thing is, as Americans, and this could be another reason why soccer isn't that huge here, is that as Americans, if we can't be the best at something, we don't want to do it at all. Like American football, we came up with American football, and no other country really wants to play it other than Canada, but we're the best at it. Baseball, we're usually the best at it. Basketball, we are almost always, all the time, the best at it. Hockey, we want to be the best at it, but Canada usually gets in the way. But there's always the potential to possibly win. But man, it's just soccer. It's like we have no chance of being the best league in the world. Like, no chance. And people here in America will push the MLS and make it sound like it's this great league. It's just, I'm sorry to disappoint you. It's not. It's not a crappy league. It's just, it's not one of the best leagues in the world. And call it a hot take. I don't care. I'm stating my opinion, and I'm not moving from it. When you sit down and watch an FC Dallas game. Watch them play. And they are a pretty decent team. They won the Supporter Shield a couple seasons ago. They're a pretty decent team. Sit down and watch an FC Dallas game and watch the quality of soccer, and then go watch a Premier League game. Go watch the Champions League whenever that goes on. And you have the best teams from all of Europe playing each other. When you have the best teams, when you have guys like Messi and Ronaldo and all of these teams from all of these great leagues in Europe all playing each other, that is the best soccer gets outside of the World Cup. And why do you think that no teams from the MLS get into that? Now, obviously, that's a European-based competition, but the MLS is just not there. It's not there. And that's my stance on it. So I walked off with that. This was an all-soccer dedicated episode. I am super stoked about the World Cup. Watch the World Cup. Watch our women. It's going to be awesome. Hopefully they win. Let's cheer them on either way. And that's going to be it for today. Super stoked. We're going to continue this on. Going to be pumping out another episode over the weekend. Probably going to be talking about the Rangers. They lost to the Oakland Athletics tonight in a really, really disappointing fashion. I think they were 1 for 10 with runners in scoring position, which is painful. But either way, we're going to move on. Catch you guys on the flippity flip.